today our guest is Visakanv, better known as Visa. He's an incredibly prolific writer and has an uncanny ability to navigate the tensions and cultural nuances of Singapore. Visa embodies an interesting contradiction. He's simultaneously one of Singapore's biggest cheerleader and one of its most thoughtful critics. He believes Singapore can become a golden age city like Athens or Florence once were, but he also argues we're still recovering from generational trauma that makes us risk-averse. Over decades of writing and publishing online, he's built a global network of online friends that are his collaborators. He has published 2 books, Friendly Ambitious Nerd and Introspect, which are guides for people navigating systems that weren't designed for them, because he promised his child self that he'll be publicly honest about the truth of his experience. Personally, I've been an avid reader of his for many years and deeply appreciate that as a Singaporean, he has been able to find global resonance through an unconventional path. So welcome, Visa.
Hi, thanks for having me. That's a very kind introduction.
Anything to add?
I when I was on the way here, I was just thinking about how I would like to kind of contextualize myself about whatever I talk about, and I can be very idealistic. I can be a bit dramatic, and I guess I want to set expectations for listeners that I'm not like an academic. I'm not I'm not a politician. I'm not like I'm just some guy who's curious and passionate, and I might say things that are incorrect in some ways, imprecise in some ways, and I invite people to have like a critical lens when listening, or critical filter when listening. That like I might say things that are not quite accurate, but like it's part of a process, right? Like I do think I've met a lot of people who freeze up at the idea of saying the wrong thing or writing the wrong thing, and then you're gonna get mocked for it or whatever, and that does happen. But like you have to kind of roll with it, and that's part of the vibe I want to bring across. But yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to see what we talk about.
Okay, for sure. Okay, maybe let's just like jump straight into it. I think in the intro I mentioned that you're a huge supporter of the fact that Singapore can have like our own like golden age.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to hear like what does being great mean? Because maybe I'll just reference a tweet of yours, right?
Sure.
Which is that Singapore is very good at gaming all the stats awards, performing on tests, and we are maybe like the best test performers on the planet. But we're kind of meat on the field, which is why people struggle to point at our great entrepreneurs, artists, filmmakers, authors, and that troubles you.
Right.
So I just wanted to hear like what does that mean? What does being great mean?
Yeah, it's a very nebulous, it's like that definition of pornography from that Supreme Court justice was like I can't define what it is, but I know it when I see it. But let's try and describe it.
Yeah.
I think greatness is a quality, and you can kind of generalize across like sports, athletes, musicians. It's like I feel like athletes, musicians, authors, cities, like people analyze these things, they feel these things, and you can tell like, oh, I'm in the presence of greatness when someone or some place is just resonant in a way that feels like a cut above the rest, and yet it might not necessarily be by metrics like the best performance. So I'm thinking now of like Tupac Shakur, for example, the rapper. Like he didn't sell that many. I mean, I don't know the precise stat. You can look it up.
Right.
But like he's not like the most successful. He only released 1 album, I think, or like Jimi Hendrix as well, right? Those guys died young, and so there is a halo effect on artists who die young. But the people that are in the ranking for greatest artists, greatest athletes, whatever, it's not necessarily those with the highest scores or the highest, whatever the metric is that people measure. It's usually part of it, but I would say that there is a quality, it's a ineffable quality of they are representative of the context of the moment in some way that elevates people's understanding of the game they are playing. And so the cities that come to mind, great at some period of time. So it was like, yeah, the Athens in the age of Pericles, Florence during the Renaissance. I would say New York a lot of times. There's multiple, and so if a lot of people feel that New York is the greatest city in the world, I think that's it has a very strong claim to that.
Yeah.
But even then, if like it has had its ups and downs, and there were periods of time where it was, I would say, like more resplendent than other times, right? There was a time where, like, I would say for me, I like the phase when Andy Warhol was around, and there was like just this great commingling of creativity and business, and you just know that if you were there, like wonderful things are always happening everywhere around, and people are drawn to it, and there's just this virtuous cycle. Like like Baghdad during the Islamic Golden Age, like people would converge on it because they knew that, oh, the future is happening here. Like algebra was just invented, chemistry is being invented, and there's like this there are these they host these conversations that are like incredibly tolerant religiously at the time. Like they were having like religious discussions, and they were inviting people from other communities. That's actually a recurring theme in great cities, by the way. Like during the Dutch Golden Age was when most of Europe was still kind of, I think they were struggling with the religious wars at the time. And the Dutch Enlightenment kind of happened because it was like a safe space amongst where everyone else is fighting all the time. Like they were allowed to be kind of free thinking and critical of each other. And so, like people who want to do great work, I think they are drawn to environments that are conducive for great work and interesting work, exploratory, questioning, critical, creative, and these things also never last forever. They seem to last like 100 years, 200 years maybe, or like 50. It depends on how narrowly you want to define it. But so like the Baghdad Golden Age ended when the Mughals invaded and sieged and like destroyed the whole city, which is very sad. But there's like other things, like I think Vienna, like before World War One. So when World War One happened, like that just ruined everything. Many cities, Istanbul had some time, like just when there's a cluster of, I would say, artists, academics, people who are at the frontier of whatever human endeavors are, compelling to people. And like, has that ever happened for Singapore yet? I think it's debatable, and if the thing is debatable, it's not yet like a slam dunk. Like you
Right.
want it to be a slam dunk where like everyone agrees like that period of time was tremendous. Like during like the I think the Gupta age in India, like they invented zero. They
Yes.
they were like it's very clear that, oh wow, great things were happening during this time. And Singapore's founding story, I think, is amazing, and you've made other videos about this, right? Like it's just the post-war kind of economic miracle, and I mean, you've gotten into this a bunch. The location is great, and it's just I just feel that my experience growing up in Singapore, I've always liked my country. I was never inspired by it. I mean, it's, the city skyline is kind of inspiring, but like
Yeah.
I'm not. I wish I was more excited to wake up in Singapore. You know what I mean? And I've visited. So far I've been to New York, San Francisco, Frankfurt, a bunch of places, and there are things about those cities that are exciting in different ways. Like and like the way in which San Francisco is exciting is that you walk down the street and someone is working on some app that's gonna be like globally relevant in a week or
Change the
whatever. But it's
world,
very
yeah.
different from New York, where there's like a culture of improv throughout the city, and
Yes.
there's just this there's like comedians and filmmakers and like all of those things. And I want to be careful not to imply that Singapore should try to be one of those things. Like I do think that's a common mistake, that people who go somewhere else get inspired and then they come back to their hometown or home city or whatever and be like, I want to bring that thing here. I mean, you can try, and maybe you can have like a nice cafe or a nice library or a nice something that has some of its spirit. But I do think that the greatness of any particular city is going to be, it has to be in tune with itself at the highest possible level. And so usually when I talk with friends about, so I have friends asking me, like you're very online, you have friends all over the world, your work is remote, like you can go and live anywhere. Where? So would you like to be an American? Would you like to be in Europe? Like, because those
Yeah.
are options. And
sure.
I'm like, well, so part of it is that my extended family is still here, so I want my child to grow up around his family. But that's if there was a sufficiently exciting opportunity somewhere else, I would have to think really hard about whether or not I want to go for that. But I do think that, like broad strokes, right? Asia in general is on the rise, like India, China, Southeast Asia. And every large entity that is doing well will have Schelling points, which is like there's points that converge. So even if like Singapore is no longer, I don't know how we're doing in terms of like manufacturing and like, so we did transition, right, from like being a manufacturing hub to being like a financial hub and so on.
Yeah.
But like it's just so well positioned to be a shelling point for anybody in the region who wants to look for an interesting place to be. Right? I think there's pretty good consensus, like good like there's some amount of narrative of, like so when in my last company, when I used to work in a software company doing marketing, we had like very talented software developers from Vietnam, from Indonesia, from like the region, and their thing is like, well, they want to go somewhere where the action is, but like they don't want to go all the way to the US where they are like 20 hours away from their families.
Yep.
So which is to our advantage, right? So we get to be the cluster space where people from the region come to do interesting work. And that's just in like software, right? But like, are we that way with culture, with theater, with literature? To some degree, right? But and I'm sure all of those scenes are trying their best, and there's like some progress, some not so on. The thing that always bothers me is and I try to keep a log of this, is we are one of the richest countries and slash cities in the world, but we haven't really been able to have lasting cultural institutions. And what I mean by that is like, again, it's like Comedy Cellar in New York City is a cultural institution. It was some guy started a bar that there was comedy in the basement, and it kept it going for like 30, 40, 50 years, I think. I don't know how many, 30 or 40 years. And now Comedy Cellar is an international cultural institution. People go there expecting to see comedians trying very, very hard. And there's a lot of competition to be on that stage. There's a lot of respect for that stage. And like, it begins with somebody has a dream, somebody has very high standards for something they want, and they keep it going. And I feel like Singaporeans do have dreams, like some subset of us, we do have dreams, we do have so on and so forth. But the story I keep seeing is that the rent is too high, and so there are all these venues like Pigeonhole, Blue Jazz, Home Club, Artistry. There's a long list, Substation. Some of those might be around in some other form or something, but like there's some location, some context in which culture is being produced, and it needs to last for decades in order to become like a real, towering, it's like
institution.
like a thing that transcends the immediate context, transcends whoever's currently in charge of it, like almost like a church, right? Like a church, and churches are examples of that. Like there's just things that people make pilgrimages to, right, to go and see. And we just keep, as a country, we seem to just keep letting these die. And I don't understand why we do that, because again, as a country, we can afford it. We can afford to give like rent relief to, like, I think most recently, Walla Walla in like Holland V, the area, like they have been a live music venue for a couple of decades, I think, and they are closing down because of rent. And like we can like our government or our tourism board, like can y'all, if you're watching this, can y'all get together and have a conversation and like how can we save these institutions? Because, and it's not it's not a rescue / handout / charity, because if you let these things survive for 30 years, they start becoming international destinations. They start becoming just producers of culture. And like I feel like to my mind / heart, like that's one of those things that, man, I wish Singapore had those. And we could. We've had it and we let it die. And like we don't have to let it die, but I if I had to guess, I think it's just downstream of a utilitarian way of thinking, which served its purpose from like the World War II up until, I don't know, Asian financial crisis. And so just for a few decades, it made sense that, so there's a famous Lee Kuan Yew quote where he said something like, literature is a luxury we cannot afford.
Yeah.
And, but he was reading literature to his wife when she passed. He's reading Shakespeare and whatnot. So he knows what literature is for.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's really to give people meaning in their lives. But I understand as well why he said it's a luxury we couldn't afford, because that was a post-war mindset, right? Like we need manufacturing, we need food on the table, we need bills, blah blah blah. And that feels like the very broad question that Singapore as a whole, and maybe the region as a whole, and like this generation as a whole maybe is grappling with, which is that, again, like so my sister was born in 1977, I'm born in 1990, and she very much, I think, went to school, studied hard, got a good job, and like flourished from that. And like, you know, she makes much more money than like our parents. You know, like, you know, there's a very kind of it's living the dream in that sense, right? Like the upward mobility materially thing, which is great. Like I do think that people later generations might forget, or like later younger people may forget that that was such a thing. But like now, like the increment in money or material goods or whatever is just the value that people get out of that. It kind of has a diminishing returns, right? And the stress keeps going up, the competition keeps going up, but more money isn't making people happier, and people are now asking what's missing. And the thing that comes to mind is again, like I was kind of mind blown to learn that before World War II, I think, like in the very, very early days of Singapore, like when the people were coming off the boats I saw this like probably like mid 1850s, 1880s. You can look this up. There were like dozens of dance troops and theater troops and Chinese opera.
You're saying like single law kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, so there's that as well.
Yeah.
But like, it felt like a narrative violation to me. That so again, we're raised in this idea of, oh, we can't afford literature, we can't afford the arts, like we have to focus on our studies or whatever. But the poor immigrants from way back, like our grandfathers, fathers or whatever, like the earliest wave of immigrants, there were theater troops to entertain the laborers. And not just entertain, right? But like to give, like, what is the job of theater? Like, it's to give people a sense of where they are situated in space and time. What is the meaning of their lives? How are they to relate to each other? What is, you know, all of those things. And back then, even people who were like illiterate and, you know, not whatever, like, and they was like struggling to put food on the table, they were smoking opium to cope with their pain or whatever, they still went to the theater.
For sure.
Right? It's like, I mean, it's a very rowdy, raucous, you know, it's not like this highfalutin. And you know, original Shakespeare was also like that. We've so there's an injustice that we do, and this is beyond Singapore. This is like just with the arts, like and it's, I guess money has to do with it. Like there is this productization of the arts into something that is like cloistered in a sterile art gallery or in a performance theater or something that's very, you know, you're supposed to dress up and you're supposed to be all like stiff and you know, it's culture. But in reality, there's a full spectrum of it. It's essential to people's lives. And I feel the appreciation of the role that the arts plays in life remains underappreciated. Or I don't appreciate the way people appreciate it in Singapore generally. I mean, so I have artist friends and they have a perspective, and I have friends who don't really care for it, and that's fine. It's like a whole spectrum of perspectives. But you know, and I think elsewhere we were gonna talk about like
like which is why actually I want to dig a bit into like what you're trying to say, right? Which is that essentially I think at the very start of like what you're talking about is that Singapore itself, when we're trying to, let's say, replicate this golden age cities, right? Like let's say like today you think about, let's say, San Fran and maybe like New York in some sense. That we shouldn't just try to wholesale replicate it.
Yes.
Right. And Singapore should have its own unique character. Right. I think there's a whole bunch of things that which is like there's part of it which is culture, there's part of it which is arts, there's part of it which is like, I guess, you know, financial side of things, like business side of things. Because I think within your tweets there's a tweet about how we have like no great entrepreneurs, artists, filmmakers, authors. So I just wanted to get a thought, like, is it something that is like almost like pervasive as a culture that kind of like dampens like Singaporeans like sense of ambition to want to replicate it, and how much of this is like it's almost like top down, like I wanted to hear a bit like your perspective on that.
There's many parts to this. One thing I feel obliged to say is that, well, we're small, right? But then again, you know, there are countries that are small that punch way above their weight in specific domains. So like you go and look at like Croatia's population, I think it's about the same as us, or maybe even less, or like within range of Singapore, and they've been in like multiple World Cup quarterfinals, semifinals, you know. So they really, if you're sufficiently focused and passionate and you bring in the expertise and you really want to get good at something, and if it's really a priority, it can be done with less than people would think. And we're also young, right? In terms of like as a well, there's this I'm internally conflicted about this stuff. Like I can hold many perspectives, and they're all kind of in disagreement, and I continue to disagree with myself about this. But like I do think there's a top down suppression effect that probably unintentional, or you don't need to. Well, again, it depends on who you talk to. Some people will say yes, the government is very much trying to suppress Singaporeans from having political expression or any kinds of expression. And it's funny. I have all these old blog posts where I think some minister will say something like, "Oh, where are our Enid Blytons and our where are our artists?" And then you turn the page and there's another post where people get sued, or people get and they might get sued for saying outright defamation things about politicians, but they're very passionate, right? And passionate people can struggle to calibrate their utterances in a way that is like palatable, I guess. And I have also in like private conversations with friends said we do need. I feel like we need a better class of satire and criticism and how to talk about things. Oh, there's so many parts to this. I'm not sure where to focus on. Wait, let me get back to your question. You're saying, is it that we don't have these things because of top down, or is it because it's the culture?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the question.
And maybe embedded within is also like what bets do we need to take to be able to create a golden age? Because it's like what you're saying, like let's say cultural institution. I agree that all those are like important like pillars.
Yeah.
But like, is there like other potentially very foundational like things that we need to be able to create other than cultural institutions, like
I mean, so if we could just if the only thing I do for Singapore in my life is nudge one cultural institution into being, like I'll be very proud of that. So like that's just that would be great. But aside from that, there's many different lenses you could use to look through this, and sometimes it just takes one or two exceptional people to change the narrative of something. And I think in recent years, like Joseph Schooling winning a gold medal was at the Olympics, that changed something for a lot of people about, and they might not even realize that they had it. They might not realize that they had some inferiority complex that Singaporeans can't do sports or whatever. And then okay, we got an Olympic gold medal, so it's a limiting belief that gets dismantled. And if you dig into the story, a lot of Joseph Schooling's success was very much his parents made tremendous sacrifices for it. Like it's not but if you go more broadly, internationally, everywhere, it's kind of always the case that's like that. It's like very rarely is there anybody who's like, my national arts program funded me and therefore I became an artist. It's like, I mean, I don't know. I know people who are passionate or angry about like the state of funding and whatever. And I almost think, I don't know if it's naive of me, but I almost think it shouldn't really matter. Like I think people should figure out how to make their work sustainably and make smaller versions of it if necessary. And especially now in the age of like social media and internet and all these things, people can go straight to market with they can just publish stuff publicly, right? You don't need to go to gatekeepers. You don't need to be like, I need a book deal in order to write a book. Like that's not necessary anymore. But I think people still, they want the approval of gatekeepers. And so there's this funny tension sometimes where people who and I'm reminded this funny story of I witnessed it when I used to play in a band. There was this guy who was very into heavy metal music, and he was upset that heavy metal music wasn't played on the radio, like there wasn't a radio station or something for it. And then I'm asking him like, what do you like about metal? And he's like, it's so like deviant from the norm. And it's like there's a direct contradiction in terms where you want to be deviant from the norm, but you want to be accepted by the norm at the same time. It's like you want a square circle. It's not going to work. But people, I guess it's emotionally difficult to inhabit that space fully, and it's satisfying or whatever to have something to complain about, right? And Singaporeans are master complainers, as everyone knows. Which again, even I think that's actually relevant to the thing, which is that I think a complaining mindset is a symptom of powerlessness or a sense of a lack of agency. So you feel like I should complain about the government, or I should and I'm not saying that complaints are incorrect or invalid, or so there's some nuance here. It's not the specifics of a complaint, and I do think that there's still a gap in the market for like really thoughtful criticism. That I mean, there are some people who are trying for sure, but I wouldn't say that we have enough critics, or we have enough quality criticism of public policy or the state of whatever. But we do have a lot of, if you go on Reddit, and I guess Reddit is a complaint house to begin with. But like one of my long-term fantasies has always been, I feel like a dozen motivated people trying to make good content. Saying make good content is just trying to have thoughtful conversations on Reddit or on like in the YouTube comments of local podcasts or whatever. Like you just need like even like 3 to 4 people having interesting conversations. You can really elevate the entire class of like political discourse, societal discourse, cultural discourse, whatever. Like you just need a few good conversations that are accessible to everyone. And Singapore is really unique in that like a dozen people can do that and the whole country can see it. You know, and I have friends in the US, in India, in like Nigeria, and all of them really like passionate, thoughtful people who see things clearly. But like it's such an uphill battle for them to get their ideas heard and considered by like a wide enough audience to, so like they have to, so even though anyone can publish anything, it's like the 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 countries are so big, the people, like you can't, by the time you spread a message from one side to the other, like it's morphed along the way as people pass on. But Singapore is so small, like one good blog post or even one good Reddit comment, I feel like it could go on Mothership one day and then gets posted on Straits Times the next day or whatever, forwarded around on WhatsApp, like everyone can see it.
Distribution is a lot easier.
Yeah, because it's so small. And you know, it's like the hop and skip, like you have to salute NSFs for that, because like we are able to stay a small, nimble country because our sovereignty is guaranteed by, it's underwritten by our conscript soldiers, who I feel like, I just want to say I feel they're underappreciated still. And like I do think that a lot of NSFs are still quite miserable, I think, about like, 2 years of my life, you know, like it's true. But like it is the price of that is that we get to be a small, nimble country, and we haven't yet really fully like capitalized on that we are small, and therefore like our culture can change very fast. A lot of other countries, I think, you know, like so like Japan, Korea, like they will struggle with adapting to new realities. But like, you know, Singapore is a maritime city state, and like if you go back several hundred years of history, like just people who showed up from elsewhere. We are a nation of immigrants mostly, apart from like the local Malay population. But like again, and like maritime cities and societies, I think, are very well equipped for change. Like you can think of the global shipping route that ran through this area. You can almost think of it as like a fiber optic cable, right? Like culture and trade and religions and everything all come and intermingle here. And so that is, I think, the gift that. So this is kind of answers the earlier question about like Singapore shouldn't try to be, you know, San Francisco or whatever. Like the thing that we are is we are at the crossroads between East and West, and we are, you know, we're very well positioned to demonstrate what healthy conflict, healthy commingling can look like. And we should explore that. And so I think one of the things I advocate for is I think we should begin thinking about what a post CMIO framework will look like, especially if we need, you know, again, like Vietnamese Singaporeans should be a thing, you know, Indonesian Singaporean, like people should be able to come from wherever, join Singaporean cultural identity, and contribute to the Singapore story, right? We don't really have I think people say things like it's politically unfeasible or whatever. I was talking to someone who is from government, and I asked about it, and they're like, "Oh, there's a CMIO is like a sacred cow. Like you can't like question it. You can't." And like how long is that sustainable in this modern world? You know what I mean?
For sure. Because I think that this is one of your like BOBAT ideas, right? Which is that get the most talented and ambitious 1,000 people in the region to want to become Singaporean.
Yeah, and
so
to
that,
contribute to the story. So like so far, the story I feel has been, if you ask people in the region, and what do you think about Singapore? Oh, you know, it's very safe, very clean. You can make a lot of money. Very boring, you know. And so people come here. A lot of like MNCs, like professional middle class, upper middle class, or like this professional managerial class. Sorry, middle class, managerial class. You know, like Boeing or Facebook, whatever large companies. You have people, executives from abroad come here. They bring their children, their families, the children go to international schools. They work here for like 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And usually less, I think 5, 10, but like some amount of years, and they spend time here, but they never really leave the like the expat bubble, I guess. And maybe they move back at the end, or maybe like something they don't really, I feel like they don't really contribute to the Singaporean cultural experiment slash narrative, and I don't blame them for it either, because I don't know if we welcome it culturally, and I don't know if, again, maybe it's politically messy to invite foreigners to participate in. So I have a friend, Cedric. I don't know if he's
Cedric
Malaysian.
Chin, is
You know
it?
Cedric? Yeah. So
Yeah.
Cedric is Malaysian by nationality, but I feel like he's such a great Singaporean asset. You know what I mean? Like, and again, it's like, you can be a Londoner or a New Yorker without necessarily being British or American. And we don't really, I guess Singapore is complicated because it's a nation, city, state. But like, I feel like there should be room for people to feel like I might not be a Singapore citizen, but Singapore is my home, or it's my second home, or whatever. I love Singapore and I want to help. I want to make it more exciting, more fun. I want to look back on my life and be like, yeah, I spent a couple of decades in Singapore and it was just so enriching, right? So, and when I talk about this in these terms, to some people are like, what the hell? Like, it's just, it's not even a possibility that they had ever considered that we are participants slash contributors slash co-authors of a cultural landscape, right? And I do think that, maybe past suppression of the arts, or, political clampdown, there's just a bunch of like legacy issues that I can't even list them out in detail. I gotta like research it again to revisit all the specifics of like, oh, this thing was shut down, this newspaper or whatever was shut down, this radio station, this. I still remember in 2006, Mr. Brown used to write for Today newspaper, and he was very entertaining, very thoughtful, I would say very Singaporean. He wrote a post that was like about Chinese students from China competing with Singaporean students, and it was very like, it's very heartfelt and also kind of sad, and also kind of, I guess the most negative frame you could put on it is like it's borderline xenophobic. But if you read it with your heart, it's just an honest anxiety about like foreigners coming in, and he was fired for it from Today, and I still feel like that was wrong. They were like, and it sent a chilling signal, I think, to anybody who's like wants to speak honestly about things that are scary or painful or whatever. And like, we can't, again, I can't draw a direct line from, oh, they fired Mr. Brown, Domino's did it for Singapore, like that. But like, it's part of a wider pattern, I think, where, again, like, we don't tolerate, and again, like, so the MSC story, for example, is like, it's, it's tragic how that played out. Like, as a nation, we were not mature enough to handle someone like him, I think, and we made it worse before and I say we, like, it's the media, it's Reddit, it's like he was obviously a troubled kid, seeking kind of notoriety, and we kind of gave it to him, and then it kind of spiraled into this mess, and then then at the end of it, like, he went off the rails, and criminal stuff, whatever. Like, I don't really want to get the specifics of that, but like, it's just, that when some other, when I say like a minister's asked like, where are our Enid Blytons and like creative Oscar Wildes or whatever, right? And even Oscar Wilde ultimately was he was arrested for being gay,
deviant,
something, but like, that's what it looks like at the start, like the real creative energies that produce incredible stuff later on. When it starts out, it's angry, it's sensitive, and it needs to be protected in a way, and it needs to be challenged. I'm not saying like just enable them to say whatever, like you can say whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, but they need like mentors. They need to be challenged to direct their energies in a healthy way. And like, we're very bad at doing that. We just basically see, a deviant kid saying wrong things, like throw the book at them, basically. And that, anybody who, and we do that with the most extreme bad case examples, but then the people who are like slightly more sensible than that, they see that and they're like, oh no, like if I let myself, say what I think and feel, whatever, like maybe that will happen to me as well. And so there's a chilling effect, and then so on and so forth. And but I think again that might be changing because of social media, because previously, if something like that happened, you only see what's in the papers, maybe, and you maybe see what's on someone's blog or someone's whatever. But now it's like, if people have counter arguments or alternate perspectives, they can share it, and it can spread. So I do think that like Zoomers, I think like the next generation of kids are growing up without as much of the freeze response or the fear response, the chilling effect. Like, it's it gets less and less with each generation. So I'm excited about that. But how do we get here?
No.
you got to interrupt
No.
me and tell
No,
me
for
what-
sure. As in, so I'm very curious actually because I think like part of this whole aspect of it, as in the whole top down and bottom up idea, is that, and I think that you do talk about it in your tweets as well, right? Which is the role that I guess the ruling party as well as the political system that affects all of this.
Yeah.
And I think you do mention that with the current ruling party as well as the current political system, there's no way that Singapore can actually, I guess, graduate or mature to its golden age. So I'm very curious, like, what do you feel that is like this dynamic here? Because I think you touched on a lot of things, which is like there's a part of it which is like there's like censorship light, right? Which is like there's almost like a cascade in terms of because of a certain action or a certain intervention, it leads to a whole bunch of people saying that okay, the line is there. I don't know where, how much more would they shift the line, and like there's all these ideas about OB markers and all this. So I wanted your sense about like, is it that because you also said that we also need to challenge, we also need to guide. So is that like something fundamentally maybe that could be adjusted in the approach that you feel that in terms of how societally or maybe from, I guess, the government side of things in terms of how we tackle the energy that is like, it's almost still bubbling out?
I mean, I don't know if I would say that the ruling party is like a critical impediment to a golden age. Like I could envision a possibility where the ruling party is still in power and there is something of a golden age subsequently. And I do think that people presume that the party is more monolithic than it is because it presents as a monolith on the outside. But like any large group of people, it's going to be internally conflicted and there's like factions inside and and again, Singapore is so small, you can really influence those people even, right? Like I feel like the place where differences can be made has to be bottom up from citizens. Like, and again, even like when, so, think about how, so when I was like 17, 18, 19, 20, or even younger than that, like I was always very passionate about reforming education. I felt like the way our education system, even in 2005, was like felt really outdated. We live in the age of the internet. Why are we using these old calculators when we have better? Why do we have closed book tests? Why do we have? I can talk about school for an hour, for multiple hours. But like, I was for a while very passionate about. Okay, we should. How are we gonna fix education? Like, okay, we should like. Is it that the Ministry of Education is incompetent in some way? And I when I was young as a child, I was like, they must be, like there must be something wrong with them. And as I've gotten older and I've heard more from teachers and other people, like my sense is, it's just again like running education for a whole country, even a small country like Singapore, is just a very, very difficult project. They have to minimize bad outcomes more than they have to. So as an individual, you think I want the best education for myself, I want the best education for my child, but what does that look like? And you can go back hundreds of years, like Montaigne and Emerson and like all those people were writing about the problems with like traditional rote schooling hundreds of years ago. Like they got it. Like the ideal system is something like personalized instruction, but that's very expensive to have a teacher for one child, basically, right? And like we have a shortage of qualified teachers. We have a shortage of there's shortages everywhere you look. Everywhere you look, there's just not enough time, not enough money, not enough energy, whatever. It's significantly a resource constraint. And again, like let's say you have the perfect principal who's idealistic and passionate about doing things better. They will get pushback from parents who are like, why are you teaching my kids XYZ when you should be teaching to the grades? Or and actually, like I've been very heartened in more recent years. Like if you see like MOE's Instagram, Facebook, whatever, they acknowledge all these things. They say things like, it's like it has to be a partnership from all parts of society. Like the expectations that parents have on teachers and like but even it's like it's just where I'm going with this is large institutions that are accountable for large volumes of population have to do so many things for so many people and with imperfect people, right? Like again, like there will be teachers who are bad and you can't really prevent it in such a large thing. So, and if you want to like introduce reform, that's a big risk. And what if the reform is in the bad direction? So where I've come around to this is that, okay, if we can figure out better ways of doing, and we in the abstract, me, my friends, whatever, just people who are interested in this, if we can figure out a better way to do education, like we have to demonstrate it, and it has to be effective enough that people start demanding it, and then the institution will adapt to the new thing. Like it's very, very difficult to change an institution from the inside because there's so much inertia and so much pressure to keep things safe, keep things the same. And I have friends who became teachers hoping to try and do good, and they do what they can. It's always it's the very often if you ask people like what's your best memory of a teacher, it's always like, oh, in between the curriculum, the teacher opened their heart and said something very real, and they're like, oh, my math teacher, he said something about not even math, something else. He just said something passionate and true, and that's like off the clock, right? It's off. He is like not working on the curriculum to share his honest self with the students, which is a risk that he is taking because maybe someone says, oh, my teacher said I should follow my dreams, so I'm gonna quit whatever. Then the parents complain, why this teacher do these things. So and that's just the nature of it's the risk that anybody trying to do anything great takes, I think. And you can't really ask the institution to, you can't like you can't operationalize like giving a shit, like really caring, so that has to happen that way. And it can't take risks past what is in the like Overton window of what is acceptable. So people who want to change institutions, I think the way to do it is you have to drum up demand for it from the stakeholders, the parents, the children, whatever. Like they have to see that something new is possible, and then it has to get to the point where so many people are asking why is this not being done, that now the institution looks bad if it's not doing it, as opposed to trying to join the institution and trying to say let's propose this new thing or whatever. They will like listen to you and then be like, okay, but we're gonna do the same thing. And so that's schools, and it's true, I think, of like all institutions as a whole. Except so there are things like when there's a pandemic, right? When there's war, right? Like usually when there's something very, very immediate and large and needs a different response, that's when you can mobilize. Like so, like wartime versus peacetime. So like peacetime reform is I've been radicalized somewhat to be like it's basically impossible. You shouldn't even try. Like if you try, it's just gonna. I mean, there might be some virtue in doing it, but like I think it's more lucrative to do interesting things on the fringes and frontiers, and then build it from there. And then if you can grow it large enough or substantial enough, then you will force others to take notice. And so like recently you see like, there are ministers who go on podcasts, right?
Yes.
And like 10 years ago that would have seemed very unlikely. But what happens is these podcasts have grown to the point where they have like undeniable influence. And so now if you were going to go into politics, like being able to speak on a podcast is a skill set that you need, right? And so it's like that. So everything is, the people on the frontiers doing thankless work that it's not rewarded. The positive externalities of your work, you're not going to fully capture it, and you're not going to be fully rewarded for it. You have to really do it for the love. Humanity is run by volunteers, really. And sorry, what was the question again?
When you're talking about, let's say, the wartime versus peacetime, being able to effect change, right? Because I think you have another talking point, which is that Singapore is still actively transmuting like our trauma.
Yes.
Right. I want to hear your thoughts. Like, what do you think that is? Like what does transmuting our trauma mean here?
Yeah. So, whenever you see people, and I have a long list of like blog posts, like it happens like clockwork every couple of years, something goes viral where some Westerner comes to Singapore and say, oh, I went around and I did all the, and it's, there's multiple classes of criticisms that Westerners have of Singapore, or even like people in the region. But usually it's the Westerners ones that really stand out because there's a kind of condescension to the way they describe the place as sterile and spooky, the surveillance stuff or whatever. And the thing that always annoys me about it, and whenever it comes up, I always ask the same questions, which is like, why don't you go a little bit further in the analysis and ask why are these people this way? Nobody who is happy and healthy and whatever wakes up one morning and is like, it'll be nice, I'm gonna make my society sterile. Like it's the sterility is very much a reaction to what came before. And again, I'm almost grateful. I mean, again, I'm not grateful that we lived through a pandemic, but like the pandemic is a useful touch point to point things out to people, which is that it takes a pandemic to make everyone wear masks and make everyone wear social distancing and like all those things happen. Why? Because people are dying, literally. And I remember, I think a bunch of stats about Singapore that I feel like people don't share a lot, and it's very telling. One is that when Lee Kuan Yew was a young boy, for example, like 1 in 4 adult Chinese men were using opium. 1 in 4. So that's like a quarter of your society is lying flat, and addicted to the thing. Like that's gonna trigger a response that's very different than, again, like 3 generations later, if you're born and like you don't see anyone doing drugs, you're like, why are we so crazy about drugs? But like that was why, just so you don't see it. And same for like I think there was this event. I think there's a Rice Media article you can look up, but it's like there's a period of time where there was just like, again, the Singapore River was disgusting. People are throwing poop in it and just poop everywhere. And like people were like dying of dysentery in the streets. Like it's just disgusting. And like, what do you do about that? And if you're in a position of power then, and you can institute like this OCD cleanliness kind of thing. So that's that. And then there's, again, I don't know if so we teach it in social studies and stuff about like, oh, there were the racial riots and stuff. But I don't know. I guess the way we teach it is so abstract and so clinical that we can't really appreciate how terrifying it actually is when it spirals and escalates, and then there's like feedback loops and people are chanting death to whoever. And yeah, so
do you feel that it motivates like potentially a golden age, or do you feel that it's actually the main factor that it has in terms of this transmitting our trauma is actually inhibiting that? Because it's like, if let's say you talk about cleanliness, for instance, right? Singapore got really clean, but like we went to the other extreme of like, okay, beyond just clean, we're gonna have it green as well, right?
Green is good.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's some vision there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I do think there's actually a lot of interesting nuance to get into here. Some amount of again, so there's a literal cleanliness, which I think like for like disease control and physical environment stuff, like that's I'm glad we are clean in that way. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But there are comorbidities to that, So it's just like OCD culture, and it's interesting to think about it in these terms. But like when your culture is so, and I got a good story about this. When I used to work at Block 71, the startup companies, and there was I think Chan Chun Sing, some minister, was visiting to see what it's like. And when they told the block, like the operator, the people running the block, oh, there's a minister visit coming up to see the startup scene, whoever's in management, I don't know what they say to who say what, right? But like one broken telephone passing, now minister coming, they got the cleaners to go and remove all the posters and all the everything that made the place interesting. They removed it to be clean for the minister's visit. And I feel like that's symbolic of like, like you killed the golden goose a bit. Like, you're so afraid of anything less than perfect that you can't tolerate the imperfections from which interestingness emerges. And so we do need some space, some context that is allowed to be kind of janky. I like the word janky because it doesn't imply dirty, but it implies, it can be the thing about a janky environment. And I would say New York is a very janky place. There's like bags of trash on the street. I mean, it's tied up, but you see trash everywhere. And then there's like scaffolding everywhere, which is a funny arbitrary consequence of their like building code. They're like, if you have the scaffolding on, you can do certain things, but if the scaffolding is removed, that means your structural works are completed or whatever, and now you are liable for, if someone gets hurt in front of your building, you can be sued or something like that. So just some arbitrary legal nonsense, whatever, leads to a lot of New York has scaffolding everywhere. Right. You can go and, if you watch on TikTok or whatever, you'll see like, hey, actually, everywhere they go, there's scaffolding. People doing pull-ups. But scaffolding is also, there's a word in design like affordance. It reminds people that everything's under construction. It reminds people that everything is in play. It keeps people from taking things too seriously to the point of, and earlier I was talking about like when art is made like super museumy and super clinical, sterile, right? Then like people now feel separated from it. They don't feel like they can participate in it. They feel like, oh, that's the artist doing the art and I'm here, the audience appreciating, and I'm not in a feedback loop with that process. And then that's unhealthy if you ask me. And I feel that New York just having trash everywhere and having scaffolding everywhere. And again, the trash is well, by Singapore standards, it's horrible, I guess. But it's, when I was there, I didn't think it was that bad. But I went in winter, so it wasn't smelly or whatever. But like, I do think the trash and the scaffolding signals that the city is like in progress and in fermenting and you know, I wouldn't expect Singapore to go that far in that sense. But like, there's something to be learned there about, you know, there's also, and like again, like a lot of companies start in garages or whatever. There's a great story about one of the skunk works for, I don't know if it's a weapons program or something. Like it's in MIT. It's like a building, like Building 42 or something in MIT. I can't remember if I get the number right or, but like people were doing science. Like I don't know if it's like Feynman's generation or no. I think it's like the Shockley semiconductor people or like this.
Right.
I can't get the specifics right. But the point is, there was a building where they housed a bunch of scientists, engineers, whatever, and all of the, it was just a janky building. Like they would drill holes. It's like drywall, so they would drill holes in the wall to do wiring to the next room or whatever for all the experiments and stuff. And so it was just very conducive to that kind of messing around. Whereas, and then I think eventually I'll send you a link to the text later if I can. You can put it in comments or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
But like, because I can't get remember the specifics. But eventually, I believe they were doing so well that they moved them to a new building that was like fancy and posh, nice chairs, nice windows, and then like I don't know if that was the only reason why it fell apart. It could be other reasons, but it's very emblematic that when you take the kind of, you know, messy garage vibe where experimentation is, it's not just encouraged, right? It's just the state of being. So you walk into the place and there's like paint everywhere, and you just feel like I can be myself here. I can do something, and if it spoils or whatever, it's fine. It's just everything else is like that.
Yeah.
And then you move it into this very shiny studio where it feels like you're already in a gallery. You feel like you're supposed to be, you know, proper.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't allow that kind of experimentation. So there are all these possible configurations of spaces, and I don't know, like, so where would we say is like Singapore's most has that kind of vibe? Maybe, I don't know, I feel like Haji Lane had some of that vibe. I haven't been there in a while, but like, you know, I remember when Haji Lane started, like just the Arab Street area. So it's a bunch of shop houses that were, you know, shop houses in Singapore are like protected by the URA or something. They have these guidelines. You have to paint it a certain way. You have to do it. And I remember writing a blog post in like 2012 in response to the news where, first of all, like it had already gotten attention in like, I think the New York Times and everywhere else. Like, oh, there's this bubbling culture in Singapore where there's like, you know, hot new coffee houses and fashion. I mean, now in hindsight, it feels a bit, you know, once something becomes like fresh and cutting edge, it quickly gets taken for granted as, oh yeah, we've seen it before, it's boring. But like at the time, it was really kind of new and different from Orchard Road or whatever. And the shop houses were being painted with like bright colors and graffiti. And there was a URA, I don't know if it's an article about it or just URA was saying, oh, you're painting the shop houses in ways that are not up to regulation or not up to code. You have to repaint it back to the proper colors. That means no more graffiti, basically. Yeah. And I was like, what are we doing? we say that we want culture and we want to go into the future and all of those things, but every time something interesting happens, like we have this, and I think it's less bad now. I think it was way worse in like probably even worse before we were born, but like from the 90s so during my lifetime, it seemed really bad when I was a kid. It doesn't seem so bad now. And now I feel like you could, if you wrote a response to that kind of thing, it would go through whatever channels and people would be like, oh yeah, okay, it's fine, you know. But that was the culture that we grew up in, right? Like where, and I have this photo of this sign. I can't remember where I got it from, but like there was a playground. Kids were running and playing in the playground, making a lot of noise. Someone sent a letter to the town council, like the kids are very noisy in the playground. And then they put up a sign that said strictly no running or playing at playground. And then thankfully, I mean, people wrote in to the newspapers or whatever, and the MP said something like, oh, it was a oversight, some nonsense lah. Like they took it down. So thankfully they took down the sign because it's ridiculous. But the fact that the sign went up in the first place, again, I feel it's like emblematic of. It's very Singaporean. I kind of if I could have that sign to, I don't know, if I had a place of business or whatever, I would like the sign to just to show what we're dealing with, right? No running or playing at playground. And yeah, you know, and I don't know if it's realistic to try and change that overnight. I think probably humor is the way out. Like you just gotta point at it, laugh at it, and it releases the hold that it has on us. Like we don't have to pretend that we are not what we were.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think that's unhealthy. And then it's before we started recording, we're talking about like accents and voices and how we present ourselves. And like we shouldn't pretend to be something we're not. Like then it just gets worse. Right. So we should just acknowledge that okay, this is where we're from and this is where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
And this is great. I remember once I was doing a comparison of like on Twitter. I was just comparing the Moscow train station with the San Francisco train station, and it's like the Moscow train stations are gorgeous. They were built during the Cold War or earlier. I think like 1930s ish, and they're very much again part of the Soviet like showing off basically, right? Or showing off to the citizens, showing off to the world, whatever. Like we are centrally planned, and we can make these beautiful train stations that look like palaces.
Yes.
And you compare to like San Francisco, California is the fourth richest. If you by GDP as a single state, it's like the fourth or fifth richest country in the world.
Yeah.
Their train stations look like butt. It's really gross, and I was kind of shocked. Like when you go to Bangalore, you go to Bangkok, you go to Philippines. All of these places have nicer trains than San Francisco. Because again, like, I guess the point in San Francisco or in California or whatever is like you're not supposed to use you don't aspire to use public transport. It's just you should be in a private Uber or whatever. And so you don't. So you and there's a case to be made that San Francisco is so good at making all these apps because they want to get away from their
physical
environment. Yeah, because they can't stand their physical environment, and it's a side conversation for another day. But like
actually, I want to get into the humor thing, right? Because I feel that like in some sense, the idea of transmuting our trauma, all right, in some sense, like the very, very like, strictly by the book, rule based, like what you're alluding to, is that there needs to be almost like a deliberate strategy to even like overcome it. Because it's like, if let's say you talk about, say, maybe Germany, right? Like Germany is still like recovering from its trauma or its guilt from like World War II, right? And you can't just leave it to time because like essentially a society as a whole, you may of course at times have like the bottom up mechanism to be able to overcome it. Yeah. But is there a way, like is humor one of the deliberate ways that you can actually transmute our society?
For sure, yeah. I do think that comedy is more powerful than people appreciate. And I mean, like, and again, it's like you can look at how when tyrants seize power, the first people they go after are they go after comedians, journalists, and like this people who make you laugh, right? Because again, if you can laugh at a tyrant, they no longer have power over you. They no longer, you're not gripped by fear anymore. And even in Harry Potter, right? Like when you have the fear, what is it? The Bogart. You got to defeat it. You got to call it ridiculous, and then it changes it into something funny, which is I think rooted in a real human mechanism, which is why like blasphemy and there's lese majest, which is like making fun of the king. I think that's if you search lese majest on Wikipedia, there's a picture of like someone farting on the face of the king at the time, like King George something the third or whatever, and it's like that cannot be allowed because it reduces the. It just delegitimizes authority a little bit. And I remember Lee Kuan Yew actually said stuff about this. He said, in the West, people feel entitled to mock their leaders, and like he said, there's no way to govern an Asian society. And I'm coming around to his point of view. I do think that there is some value in decorum. Like I don't want my prime minister to be a clown. Like some people do. Some people want to. I don't want like my national newspaper to be mocking my prime minister. And like I think there should be some context in which that is allowed, but I don't think it should be like gratuitously encouraged. And I'm seeing this play out with. It's funny, there's a lot of things that I was critical of about Singapore growing up that Western society has made me revise my views on, and I'm very annoyed at Western society for doing that because again like now since marijuana was legalized, I think across the US in multiple like so now if you go to San Francisco or New York, I don't know where else, I'm guessing it's probably everywhere, but like there are weed shops everywhere and you can smell weed everywhere and it sucks. It's really and people complain about it. Like there are people who have said, I used to think it should be decriminalized, and it should be. People shouldn't get arrested. okay, in Singapore's context, that's very far from the Overton. Like, okay, just in the context of the US, right, where they have police brutality and people get beaten to death, shot to death by police for minor things, right? In that context, people should not be arrested for drug-related offenses. I think, again, I don't know how Singaporeans feel about that, but like, they then made it so it shouldn't. They got to the point where now it's legalized and you can buy it from every corner on the street, and the demand is so high that there's so many shops everywhere. You can't walk down those places without seeing and smelling it everywhere. And people are like, this is not great for raising kids in this environment. It's not great for. And so there's some balance where, again, crushing people for it is bad, but like completely open support for it is also probably not good. So there's some like gray area in between where it's probably like it should be not punished too severely, but it shouldn't be encouraged. It should be kind of like be illicit about it somewhat, which is kind of how we do like like our red light districts in Geylang and whatever. Like we have them, right? We have legalized prostitution, but it's not like you can advertise it in the papers or whatever. Like so in the US there are like these, I don't know if it's true now, but they have all these like magazines where you can flip through and there's all the call girl ads or whatever. So it's a bit harder. So making things slightly inaccessible does make a difference, reducing access. And I think we ban gambling sites, right? Like if you really want to gamble from Singapore on a gambling site, you can use a VPN. But like simply adding the barrier that you have to use a VPN to do it, I'm guessing reduces it by like 80%, 90% maybe.
For sure.
And I think that's probably worth doing. So it's, like I started out being so, we should be able to criticize our government. We should be able to talk about race in publicly or whatever. And I mean, I still hold those values to be true. I don't like a society or a culture where all those things are suppressed to the point where people are scared to talk. But you can see that if you open up completely and anyone can say anything, you have freedom of speech, like whatever, there is a failure mode, which is like almost like a DDoS attack, like just enough. They don't even need to be bad actors. They just need to be. But like again, you look at like the Western US media environment where anybody can say anything, and so people say contentious stuff that stirs up feelings, and then people get angry, and it's not clear that that allows for progress to be made on sensitive cultural issues. Right? So again, like gender wars, and it's just at every scale. So there's many different experiments running in the world, and I'm kind of glad to be in Singapore in that sense. And again, it remains to be seen. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe the thing about control, top-down control of communications and what is acceptable and what is not, OB markers and stuff, is that sometimes there'll be problems and no one's allowed to talk about it, and then the problem will swell to a point where it goes out of control.
For sure.
Whereas on the other hand, a place like the US, for example, anyone can say anything. It's a big mess. Every day people throw shit in your face, like metaphorically, like you just read, what the hell did I just read? That kind of thing. But when there's a real problem, someone will definitely say something about it, so it was likely to get addressed. So there's two kind of spirals and it's hard to say one is universally better than the other. It's very much a context. So I think we can say I would say most Singaporeans are pretty proud. If you compare our pandemic response to other countries' pandemic responses, I think most of us are proud that we had a good one. But at the same time, like, that's what we expect. The trade-off that we've done over the years where, we have to stand in two lines at the school, which is just a symbol of we go about our days, bowing our heads, following the law, because the trade-off we expect is like freedom for security. Basically, the shortest, most succinct way, we trade off some of our freedom. We expect security. So it's like, we expect the pandemic to be dealt with properly. Like if the pandemic is not dealt with properly, what the hell are we doing everything else for, right? It's supposed to be that when times, we've been through difficult times before, when difficult times come back again, we want to be well prepared for it. But at the same time, we live our lives in between bad events and we want our lives to be, happy, right? I don't know, any further?
Actually, I want to continue like on this tangent, right? Because I feel that an interesting thing about this is that because essentially the government is trying to tread this like very like this middle path. And
I do feel for them. It's a very difficult job, but they are paid the best money in the world to do it. But I do feel for them. Like even money, it's tragic that things get so adversarial. But then, sorry, continue your question.
No, but exactly, because it's almost like there is this adversarialness between like government comms, like what government tries to push out in terms of messaging and how the citizens actually respond.
Yeah.
And I think actually you mentioned this in your blog post when you were meeting Lee Hsien Loong like many years back, right? That the disconnect is that we don't actually know what's going on up there. We don't know that there are trade-offs that need to be made.
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand the trade-offs that are being made. Like, do you think that, as in, of course, that explains the disconnect, you know? And I'm just curious, like, is there a way to tread this path better? Because it's like, I think you mentioned a whole bunch of things. There's a humor part, there's like, you know, allowing for more. But like, how do you think about this whole situation?
That's a very big, you know, I'm just imagining anything I say now, like if some civil servant watches it, they'll be like, yeah, right, bro, you think I haven't tried, or you think I haven't this, because it's difficult. Again, like groups of people are hard to manage and spiral effects and whatever. But anyway, is there, I think we are getting better in general. I do think like social media, like just not to say social media specifically, but like just the media landscape, I think, has evolved for the better. I think there used to be less room for discussion and feedback, and the quality of feedback was not that great. And you know, like I know people who work in government who their exposure to anything from the citizens, from like wider citizenry, is overwhelmingly critical. So they don't. It's difficult for them to spot thoughtful criticisms amidst the sea of, you know, very angry people who are just raging. So there needs to. So I think one mental model I've had is like we need. I've had the thought multiple times that we need moderators, and like volunteer moderators who are not necessarily from the government, or not necessarily like you know, I think I have a blog post somewhere like SG 100, right? Like what's it going to be like? You know, we still like the concept of parliament, for example, is still so archaic. It's like hundreds of years technology, right? And there is something to it with the decorum of, okay, everyone get in a room and we all spend our time together to take turns to speak. And you know, there's something about the ceremony of that I appreciate. But like, you know, how do you want your country to be run? I would like every issue to be debated in full, in a way that cannot be done face to face, in person, over time. There should be a public record, something like a GitHub or a Reddit or whatever, where you can see the full extent of the thinking that's gone into it and the debates that have gone into it, and people should be able to comment. And there should be, you know, like maybe you should like SingPass login kind of thing, like a SingPass login Reddit for Singapore, you know, where people who want to contribute can contribute. And yeah, again, you see the comment section on any prime minister, like again, like you see like now I guess Lee Hsien Loong and now Lawrence Wong, whatever. You see their Facebook posts or Instagram posts or whatever. Overwhelmingly, the comments are all. It's just. I look at it and I just think it's such a. Again, everyone's just like being supportive or being like haha, I love you, president, or love you, prime minister, or you know, it's very mundane nothingness. And I always think this is an opportunity. This is a space that could be used for thoughtful conversation, but it's not. And I just wonder how different. And I feel, I mean, this is one of my bits that I repeat everywhere. Like every comment section could be better everywhere on the internet, everywhere in the world. Like and to some degree, my success on Twitter is that I have embodied that idea in my replies and in other people's replies. I'm like, we can just have a higher quality of replies. And once you've had a higher quality of replies, other people who recognize and value quality appreciate it and they join in. And so, you know, there are all these, like, when I used to work in a software company, downstairs from my office, there was a startup accelerator / incubator. And once a week, they would do open house for anyone who wants to come, which is like a noble idea, like lets anyone come. But the problem with that is when you let anyone come, anyone can come. And so the whatever conversation is happening there ends up being dragged to the lowest common denominator of like people who are just window shopping, aren't very serious about startups or whatever, haven't done any reading, and they just ask very basic one-on-one questions. And the thing that happens when you do that is that there are people in the office block who are experienced, they have raised money, they have customers, they have like they can share some very meaningful, impactful things, but they don't want to spend their time explaining something to someone who's not even interested. You know, so and if every time they go to the open house, everyone else there is just blah, 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 like, then they're not going to show. It's not worth their time. And so it's like a well-intentioned let everyone speak social norm drives away the highest quality possible conversation. So there's a kind of elitism light or whatever that needs, moderation is necessary. And people don't have the stomach for it because it means making editorial decisions. And again, like you don't want like there's a bad form of this where, oh, someone in the Prime Minister's office decides what comments can and cannot be allowed on the page. Like, then you're just censoring people. So that's not good. But like you could have like a, like, and again, like YouTube and stuff have figured out some forms of this, right? Like you could have a top rated section. You could have and again, it's like if everyone's likes are equally valuable, then you just get low. You just kick the can down the road a little bit, and it's still nonsense. But like, if you have like I think it's like Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, they have like people have thought about this problem in multiple dimensions, and there are several solutions. And it's like if you have like a curator, right? And like I would kind of love this job actually, like to be a curator of conversation in some context, whether it's a national context or whatever. And again, to some degree, journalists are kind of supposed to do this, but in practice, they don't do it very well because it's difficult to be a journalist. Like they have to report stuff every day. They have like deadlines. They have to rush. They don't have the time and energy to really like do these very, involved things where they analyze, what has happened before. I remember I was a bit I don't know if you say black pilled, but like I've seen a few examples of newspaper articles where they say things that are just not true. Like they say something like, this is the first time this has happened. I'm like, no, it's not. Your newspaper itself reported that this happened 7 years ago. But the journalist has been around for 3 years maybe, so they don't know what happened before and they don't have the time to go and look it up. So it's like there's this institutional amnesia. And all institutions have this. All institutions have institutional amnesia, and only, like the enceks, I guess, the people who have been around forever, who are volunteers to want to remember what's going on, they can tell you, this has happened before, this has, and so on. And so yeah, stop talking about comment sections. But yeah, so like a good comment section, like if you really have like a dozen people who really make an effort to explain to each other what's really going on. And usually it's people who are personally invested in wanting to know what the truth is and wanting to know what quality options are and whatever. And as I say these things, I always have to wonder, maybe I'm the, it's like a dark forest element to it, right? Maybe I'm just outside maybe there is some secret club where all of this is happening at very high quality and I'm outside of it. But if that was the case, then so is everyone else. So most other people are also outside of where the good conversation is happening. And I just feel that we deserve a higher quality of public discourse, especially so that we can attract and invite people who are not from the existing halls of power, not from the existing environment. The Ratatouille rules are from the movie Ratatouille. Like anyone can cook, but not everyone can be a great chef, but a great chef can come from anywhere.
Yes.
Right. And again, Singapore is so small. So like if we have any talent anywhere, I'm always thinking there are so many like overseas Singaporeans who have all kinds of, again, to leave any place is a high agency thing to do. Right. And again, we're a nation of immigrants, of people who left. Right. Yes. And so that itself selects for people who are a certain way. And I do think one of the exciting things about Singapore's future is that media technology means that we can now communicate. I mean, this has been true for a while, but like we can just get better at it. Overseas Singaporeans can have a direct role in the way Singapore is going, and they have interesting perspectives, and they are global citizens. And there's just I don't know if anyone is actively thinking about how can we invite more overseas Singaporeans to participate in where we are going. Like we should there should be a YouTube channel interview. Maybe you can interview. There should be conversations that are interesting and exciting, and we should hear about who are the interesting people, what are they doing, and we should be excited for them, and just have this sense of waking up in the morning. Like I guess when you go all the way back full circle, I'm just like I want to wake up in the morning excited to be Singaporean.
For sure.
And I think it's possible. And
I think like a large part of this is really like culture, right? In some sense, right? And like I think you have one tweet which is that maybe I'll just quote here, right? Which is in Singapore at least, like our best people are basically working on all the possible levers of society.
Sure. Yeah.
The lever which you are personally convinced about that other people are struggling with is culture / narrative, and that's the one that I'm personally choosing to optimize / focus on. Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm well fit for it, and I don't see people trying. All the engineering stuff we are excellent at. Our Marina Barrage, anything. like logistics wise, I love flexing on Americans. Like, hey, when I was born, there were 2 train lines in Singapore, and now every so often, like someone said, oh, there's a new train line opening this to this. I'm like, yeah, that's just what it's like to be Singaporean. We got new trains.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, very sad. But like, yeah, those things we are great at. Like I'm sure all our defense. Like I've never once worried about what is the state of Singapore's defense. I trust that the people in charge have it figured out,
For sure.
and I don't need to worry about it. And it's a great feeling, right?
Yeah. But I guess the trade-off is that, like, why are people so bad at framing culture and commentary, right? I mean, the other part of it is like, when you're talking about trains and material stuff, it's like we are very based in that sense.
I mean, there are layers to this. I still remember one of the moments that blew my mind was I had a teacher in primary school. She migrated to the States and she had her kids in the States. I think she's in Florida maybe. And then she flew back to Singapore once in a while to visit, and I got to meet her kids. There are 2 or 3 daughters.
Can move the chair
sorry,
back.
I moved out of the screen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a teacher. She moved to the States. She had her kids there, and I was so struck to meet her kids. So the kids are genetically Singaporean Chinese. Both my teacher and her husband are both Singaporean Chinese, and they were born and raised here, and they migrated later. So they are transplants, Singaporean transplants. But their kids are American, I guess, and they were raised in America, and they're about 10, 11 years old. I think one was 7 years old. And I met them, and they were so effervescent. They were so bubbling with personality and opinionated, and they were just saying, they were saying, I want to do this. What's going on with that? I'm like, wow, I've never seen Singaporeans like that. But they are technically genetically Singaporean, right? So it's like anybody who says things like, oh, Asians are genetically that way, like to me it became clear it's bullshit. It's the context trains us to be a certain way. People who don't fit in that context, they leave to go somewhere else, and then they flourish with whatever. So there's a reinforcing effect where the culture becomes more and more like what it is. And like what is that? Just caring about the opinions of children, I think, is one of those things. Caring about self-expression, caring about being able to speak and being able to talk and all those things. Like these are, and again, I think it's an uphill battle for people who want to raise their kids differently in an environment that doesn't naturally encourage it, because there are natural like again, if you go somewhere where downstairs your block there's like a fitness corner and every day people are running, you'll feel like, I should run also. But whereas I grew up in the East where there's a lot of that, near the beach, and for the past 12 years or so I've been living in Yishun, which up until recent, I mean, so it's an older estate, there are a lot of old people, so when I go to the park it's like old people in wheelchairs, it's kind of sad. It's like, I mean, just as a young person to be around very, very old people, and there's like funerals at the void decks every week, basically. Now it's a bit less, but like in the earlier years. And so I just, and again, that's not even culture in the sense of values or whatever, right? It's culture in the sense of the people around you influence who you are and how your actions and what you feel is necessary or unnecessary, or what you feel compelled to do. And so, if you want opinionated kids, it'll happen naturally in an environment where people just value that and encourage that. And yeah, I think again, just the way we do, I don't know how much this has changed in primary school in Singapore or whatever, but like just the way we used to do like listening comprehension and oral, they give you the thing and you got to point and say what you see. I think it's probably changing. I think kids increasingly have more of a sense of their own personal lives. I don't know. I haven't actually theorized about this or discussed about this in great detail, but it's just I just keep reflecting on the things that we think are immutable about our culture is actually very arbitrary. It's actually very downstream of very specific events. And again, if you go back to you see, who was the PAP co-founder? Lim Chin Siong. It's like that era of like speeches given in Hokkien and stuff, very fiery and passionate. And then just this culture, and my wife does these like newspaper deep dives for fun, and she like in the 80s there was this thing called Swing Singapore where there was like mass dancing in the streets.
Right.
Which seems so like if you tell me in the 90s or 2000s that in the 80s there was a mass dancing in Singapore, I'm like, really? And I think they eventually shut it down because they felt it was like bordering on, like kind of inappropriate or whatever.
Oh.
And now it's like, well, why inappropriate? Why? Because people are having too much sex, is it? Like, maybe we should have kept it going, or maybe we should reintroduce it or something, right? But like, yeah, it's like we tend to assume that the past was very neat and tidy in certain ways that it wasn't, and we tend to assume things move linearly when they don't.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I think culture can be changed. It does require like quite a monumental effort. It requires persistence, particularly. A thing that I keep seeing is that, and all over the world, not just Singapore, but like when people are passionate about changing a culture, they try for like 3 to 4 years and nothing comes out of it, and they're like, give up lah, it's not working. You really have to commit for 50 years. You need people who are like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna keep doing it. Every year I'll be here. And if first 10 years no one shows up, I don't care, I'm still gonna be here.
Yeah.
And like there's something about, like, I think about 7 years in, where someone keeps showing up and eventually they earn the respect of people who, because initially people think, oh, they're just doing it for likes and views and attention or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're just doing it to cause a scene, and they're not serious about it. But if you stick around 10 plus years, and then people start to respect that. Like, oh, that guy, I don't necessarily agree with him, or I don't really like what he's doing, but wow, he's still doing it. That's really something. And then you become there are all these little stories here and there. Like there used to be this guy, I don't know if he's still around, but he used to go to all the public live music events, and he'll dance at the front.
Yeah.
I call him Uncle Dennis or something, Uncle Francis, some guy. And he'll be there and he'll be dancing. And he just became a little micro one-man cultural institution, And like him dancing gives other people who are shy about dancing permission to also join in, right?
Yeah.
Like, because he's leading, basically. He's a leader. He really is. He's a cultural leader just by showing up and dancing again and again.
Yep.
And like, we just need more people like that, and we need to celebrate stories of people like that. And I think that goes quite a long way. Yeah.
I'm curious what's the role of the artist then? Because like I think you have one to which is that like I think Singapore needs more artists than politicians, and this is maybe a very controversial thing to a lot of like Singaporeans, because it's like there's this pathway that people expect their kids to go. So I'm just
I mean, so I do have a very high bar for what I mean by artists. And I've been reading this essay from Baudelaire. So he was like a French essayist / painter in the 1800s, I guess. And he was basically he kind of described, some people say he invented the concept of modernity, or like just he put a name to it and he described it in a way that's very compelling. And he was talking about like what is the role of the artist in modern life, or like what is the painting in modern life. And he described it, my interpretation of what he was saying was that the artist's job is, an interesting thing is, even then he took great pains throughout the essay. It's a very long essay, quite long. He took great pains to distinguish between like the artist who is like kind of the mere stylist and technician. And again, language is very tricky here, because any word you use you can substitute in and it may or may not work. But like the picture he's trying to paint is, there's a kind of person who works with paint or works with whatever, and they are just making artifacts that are, like gift shop stuff. Like, it's just, it's fine, it serves some purpose, people want to buy, people want to hang, whatever, like, but it doesn't challenge anything. It doesn't have a, it's just making pretty things, right? Which again, like the world needs probably. But like the real artist, capital A artist, right, is someone who is, and here I'll synthesize a few other people also, like Marshall McLuhan says, the artist is someone who is at the frontier of sense perception. Like, so this is a bit technical, but like they are sensitive enough to witness what is happening in the world around them, and then they synthesize their experience of what's going on, and they present it in a way that because they are more sensitive than the average person, they can feel the thing before. It's kind of like those animals responding to earthquakes or whatever, right? Like how does the animal know? Because they are, anyway. The artist is a conduit for new. No, I mean, even saying new implies, oh, we're gonna come up with something new, but it's really just they are the species. They are the sense making apparatus of the species, basically, and they help us witness and see what is happening almost before we are ready to see it. Which is, I mean, they do it before we are ready to see it, which is why we punish them, right? And then later on, after they're dead or whatever, like, oh, they were so prescient and they had foresight and they showed us the way or whatever. Like, every risk-taking artist, and the challenging thing is that describes like those who are good at it, and the people who are bad at it will also want to be described that way. So like positive deviance and negative deviance are both deviants, and they both are incomprehensible to the norm, right? So think of someone who made like very beautiful graffiti or whatever, like that elevates the public space. But someone who's making shitty just vandalism, they can claim to be that, and then people argue about it, and it's just a distraction. And then I don't know if there's any way to really stop that, like or to like there's no like one test for what is art and what is vandalism or junk. But you have artists when just the people around them are very in tune with the time and with possibility, and they feel a sense of their place in the world. So I have to connect it with my way of thinking. Like when you're around artists, you're excited to wake up in the morning. I feel when they what's his name, the guy from Before Sunrise, Ethan Hawke. He has this great quote about how you don't wake up. Most people don't need art most days, right? You wake up in the morning, you're not thinking about like some famous poet or whatever until something bad happens to you, or something very bad or something very good happens to you. Like your parents passes away, or you get betrayed in a romantic relationship, or your child is born and you're like wow, I've never felt this horrible before, I've never felt this good before. That's when you're looking for someone to help you make sense of it, and that's when you read poems or you listen to music or whatever, and it helps contextualize your feelings, which are deviant from day-to-day feelings in a way, right? But even then, day-to-day feelings also deserve like attention and whatever. So that's like a very human experience, emotional, whatever kind of approach to thinking about art. But then there's also like I feel like that's just me setting up for what you're really asking, which is like kind of the role of the artist in the ordering of society, right? Or the self-concept of society, right?
Yeah.
So like I feel that CMIO is outdated. I don't think that elegantly argued. So okay, suppose CMIO is outdated is true, or like I believe it's true. Like, what is the way to spread that understanding or belief in society in a way that is meaningful, right? And I think the only obvious thing to do is to tell stories of Singaporeans who are not CMIO. There are black Singaporeans, there are Turkish Singaporeans. There's people from all over the world who are Singaporeans, born and raised, serve NS if they're guys, or they just speak Singlish, and their stories are just not part of the national narrative. And it would take, I wish a filmmaker would make that. So if Jack Neo made a movie about their experience, that would be an artistic thing to do, as opposed to Our Boys to Men 7 or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, which isn't to say that a sequel can't have art in it, but like just the way you approach things in terms of what you want to present to the world. So like Ilo was it got Singaporeans to confront the ways that domestic helpers raise our kids, and what that means for their sense of attachment and stuff like that. Again, it's kind of crazy how many Singaporeans are raised by domestic helpers, and then the helpers leave, and then they're trauma bonded. They lose their primary caregiver basically, and then they have to, and then from there you go into there's all kinds of issues that come up from that. But like again, like how do we expect people to raise kids when their jobs are so taxing and housing is so expensive? But like even that, I think housing prices like also seems to be an international problem. Like, so I don't know where I'm going with that. But
I guess like now is like a good time to maybe share a bit of your story, right? Because it's like as in like when you talk about introducing stories and narratives that go beyond the mold. Because I think for yourself, like you navigated a system that was like potentially fundamentally broken for someone like you, at least in Singapore, right?
Yeah, I mean, so far so good, right? I mean, like, I had a funny conversation with, I think, my ex-boss once, or just this funny realization where, so we were discussing the legacy of Lee Kuan Yew, and we were like, was Lee Kuan Yew a great man, or was he, mistaken in some ways? And like, the truth is, you can't actually know yet. Like he's gone, but his legacy remains to be seen. Like, so okay, 50 SG 50 so far so good, right? But what if like by SG 80 it all goes to shit? And then it turns out that it's because there was once an authoritarian leader, and they instituted a bunch of great things, but the culture was not good enough, and then people don't know how to speak truth to power or whatever, and so next thing you know, cascade and goes to bed. On the other hand, if it's as citizens of Singapore, and Singapore is so small. Every individual citizen or any citizen who feels drawn to any kind of good work, right, potentially has the ability to put Singapore on the map in some way, right, or to do great things for Singapore, or even just doing great things for yourself as a Singaporean, right? So like I have 100,000 followers on Twitter, and like for a lot of them, I'm the only Singaporean they know, which is very funny because then they think their idea of Singapore comes from me.
Yep.
Which is from their point of view, it's like, oh, this Singaporean guy, he's so, hyper verbal, talks a lot full of ideas, full of creativity or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not representative of my people, but I'm not gonna stop you from thinking that, like, you know. But it's a very funny one because I used to be so critical of Lee Kuan Yew, and my success in life indirectly will be his success in a sense. You know what I mean? Or like I will like. If I do anything great in my life, and I don't know if I will, I mean, I'll try my best for myself and my family and whatever. But like any Singaporean's success is downstream of the founding fathers. You know what I mean? Even whether or not you like them, right? The fact is they created the context, and maybe the context was shitty in some ways, but it was the context. So whoever made the context gets to. I mean, they're gone already, but like they partake in the success story. You know, so like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger likes to say that his success is not possible anywhere else in the world but the US. And in a way, George Washington, which is like 250 years ago, 240 something years ago, George Washington plays some small role in Arnold Schwarzenegger's success. Right?
Yeah.
You see how the dots connect, right? So the fact that we are our parents' legacy, we are our nation's legacy, we get to influence what that is. Which is it's a lot of responsibility in a way, right? Like, it's like if you do well, you make them look good. You do badly, you make them look bad. Like, it's a that's family, right? And again, it's such a small nation city state. I do feel like all Singaporeans are kind of family. Especially when juxtaposed against Americans, for example, where there's really this sense of alienation and people feeling like their countrymen are not their country. Like, you know what I mean? It's like very divided. But again, it depends on who you talk to. I know there are Singaporeans who feel like they are disenfranchised from the Singapore story. And I think that's an important thing to kind of engage with as well. But there's like infinite things to do. There's no shortage of work we can do to bring people together, tell more people's stories, and be more considerate and look for ways to make a place more comfortable and also more exciting.
Yeah,
like, I think that's possible, and I again, like if it's a government official saying this, it's like who shut up lah, you know. Like, it's like, who wants to hear a minister lecturing them about? I mean, on one hand, you kind of expect them to, like, you want your Minister of Home Affairs or Minister of Culture, Communication, whatever. Like, we want the country to be, you know, a place, a hub for this thing, a hub for that thing. Sure, like, you know, do your job. I respect that you have a job to do, and, you know, like, especially all the infrastructure stuff and all that. But like cultural stuff, you don't really want to hear from politicians. You want to hear it from artists. I feel like you want people who are. I mean, I wonder if even cool has something to do with it. Like, you want people who are cool to show you what a cool life could be. That's part of it, I think. But even, you know, I have fond memories of conversations I had during my NS life. There were a couple of senior officers that I admired. And I had conversations with them that really inspired me, even. Like, and there isn't really any very meaningful place. I mean, not meaningful place. There isn't. I don't know what's a good context for me to share those stories. I've tweeted about it before. I've blogged about it before. But like, usually the responses I got. But again, this is just comment section issues. But like, the responses I got were like, yeah. You kind of you were like, you got swept up by propaganda or whatever. And, you know, it's random internet commenters. But like, you know, I encountered senior officers who were respected by their men, who created a context in which people could work and feel appreciated and valued. And it's just you know, like, to me, as a guy, especially as a young guy, they were like models of healthy masculinity that I looked up to. And like, you know, nowhere do I see anything like that in like the SAF marketing material or whatever. And I don't know if they do it, will it look fake? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But the question is like, how can you tell these stories? And actually, I do think, like, watching like NDP videos and stuff over the years, I do think there's a growing contingent of like filmmakers in Singapore who tell stories very well. Like, if you watch last year, I don't know how the last 3, 4, 5 NDPs, like there are these like video segments where it's like a mother and a son, or just small snippets of Singaporean everyday life stories, and they just told very well, I think. So that's promising to me. Like, I do think like film is a domain that can be used to create shared understanding, and it bypasses certain things, certain intellectual. I mean, okay, some people always find a way to complain, but like, it's just having stuff for people to kind of gather around and share an understanding of is very valuable. And I think the more of that we have, the better it'll be.
Which is why I guess like maybe this is a tall ask, right? Which is like how will you tell maybe your own story to like someone who, is shaped by the context of Singapore, right? Because I think there's a lot of things which is like not very legible. Like just when we talk about like good deviances and bad deviances, I guess that through your educational journey, there are like, I guess teachers will see that you like, you're reading the books under the tables as something that's like a bad deviance.
Yeah.
But how will you actually share your story to make people understand like that you are trying to like navigate all of this?
Wow. I mean, I have shared bits and pieces here and there in conversations and writing about it, and I guess it's a very storytelling question. It's interesting. It's a very, how do you tell a compelling story? And I always reflect on so Hassan Minaj, the comedian, he had a special called Homecoming King, where he's this Muslim brown man telling a story to a large audience of largely like white Americans, I think. And he told a story about like it was mostly true story. He kind of like fudged some details or whatever, but like a story of like the immigrant story, and he talked about going to prom and being interested in a girl, and then like her family said no, and then like he tells very, very poetically tells a story of like how he was cycling back home in his like prom outfit and like sitting on his bed playing video games, and like anybody who was there, I think, would have felt how human he was and how universal his struggles are. Like, everyone has experienced some kind of rejection, some kind of betrayal, some kind of it's not your fault, but you kena, and like, it's just I think there's a model in there about storytelling that I reflect on with regards to if you need to persuade like a hostile audience, like, I mean, not hostile, but like there's people who are not receptive to the kind of person you are or whatever. Like, it's really, you have to get into very fundamental storytelling principles to get them invested in your story, I guess. I mean, if you're asking me like to retell my story, I guess again, like I'm in real time, I'm trying to calibrate like how much should I share and how much time should I take. Like, I don't want to overdo it, but like, yeah, okay, I was born in 1990 in Singapore. My parents are Tamil Singaporeans. I'm left-handed, which I feel is my parents run their own small business, which I think is a very significant thing that kind of set me apart from people whose parents have jobs, and like, because if your parents have jobs, they have to please their bosses to get a raise, or to and they have to not ruffle feathers at work to whatever. But like small business owners, they can do whatever they want. They don't need to, like, if they want more money, they go out and get more money. If they want to not work today, they don't work today. My father would like come home in the middle of lunchtime to take a nap, after lunch. Like, he can do that. He has the freedom to design his life however he wants. At the same time, he has no like work-life separation. And the picture I always think about is they have a home office, but then they also have the office phone. They run like there's multiple lines from the office phone, so you can answer the phone from anywhere. And they even have one in the living room. They have one in their bedroom.
Yeah.
So like, my father can answer office phone. This is before smartphones made everybody. So now everyone is like this lah. But like back in the early 90s or whatever, like, to have your office phone in your bedroom and in your living room and to answer those calls at all hours of the day, it was kind of strange. And it was my childhood. So I'm always kind of, there's like, I can work whenever I want, but there's also like no work-life separation. And I, as a small business owner's son, like, I just have this very, can we change that? Can we try something different? Like, the world is very malleable, I think, in a way that some people like preach that, I guess, but like, even then it's like within some context. Whereas if you just raised in it, like, you just manipulate things around you everywhere you go by default. And again, I think even as I mentioned, being left-handed, like if you're left-handed, nothing is designed for you. Like everything, this thing is on the right side, this, and it's you just get used to having to adjust things to suit you. And I'm a minority, so throughout my life, like I would encounter interactions with people where, like overt acts of racism are one thing, and which I think that's a lot of people have talked about. But the exhausting, one of the exhausting things, or the thing that kind of bugs me more about being a minority, is that sometimes you have a negative interaction with someone and you don't know if it's because of racism. That's when it's really tricky. It's like, are they just having a bad day? Are they being mean to me specifically? Do they not like tall guys? Or is it, and they go on with their life, right? They just move on to the next interaction. I'm carrying that in my head, like, what was it about me that bothered them? Or are they just like that with everyone? And then, you have to scenario plan, or you don't have to, I guess, but like I spent a lot of time analyzing that stuff growing up, I guess. And so that led to me being, I think I actively made an effort to become charming and outspoken and verbal and getting people to see my point of view, I guess, and to like just to navigate my life, just to survive, right? Just to not feel like shit. Right? I need to be able to make friends with people who have my back, because I don't necessarily feel like the world has my back. And again, like I was never like I was like in the gifted education program, I guess, because I read all the books before school started, so I was already familiar with all the material. But I never really learned how to study like on demand, like so like if you look at my grades, it's like wow, straight A, then just fell off a cliff around secondary school ish, where once you have to start like studying to retain the material, like I was not interested in that. I was interested in computers and video games and anime and basketball and girls. But like it's funny because looking back, my instincts for my life were correct. Like I wish I had spent more time on the computer. I wish I had written more online. Like I was doing all of that because I was compelled to do it. And then I felt this tension between myself and my social reality, where everyone around me is like, oh, what university are you going to go to? What course are you going to take? And I couldn't bring myself to give a shit about any of that. And yet I felt like I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad kid, naughty boy, problem child for not going along with my social reality. And I mean, why did I not do that? I think another part of it is that I read so many books as a child. So when I was very, very young, my parents running their own business, so I'm left on my own a lot, and my siblings are all much older than me. So it's like it's a large family, but I'm kind of like an only child because I'm so much younger. And so books were my first companion. I go to the library, borrow tons of books, read about ancient civilizations and all that shit. I remember the Japanese occupation. Learning about hyperinflation during the Japanese occupation blew my mind. Like just the idea that money can become worthless overnight, basically. And like that gave me like a minor existential crisis / social panic mode. Like, guys, like, and I think I remember it was being talked about, it was being discussed in school. Like, just in history, these things happened. Japanese came, blah blah blah. Then banana money, blah, blah, blah. And then and then like after that it's like recess or whatever, right? And then like everyone's like, oh, okay, recess time, let's go and play. And I'm like, I need to sit down, bro. Like, what the hell? Money can become worthless. Money is fake. Money is like, and I've been like that thought / feeling lingered with me for many years, and I like needed to know, what is money really? What is and it's all kind of connected to, if you're a misfit, you need to know how you fit. You know what I mean? Like if you're not a misfit, you just go with the flow. The flow is fine for you. But if you're a misfit, then you need to find your fit. You need to find your found family. You need to find the context that you can work in, that you can thrive in. And so, yeah, I realized all my life I've just been very deliberate about trying to build a table for my. I never felt like I was very welcome at any particular table. Like even like at school, right? Like you go to like at lunch recess time, every table is, here are all the drama club people, here are all the athletes, here are all the soccer boys, here are all the, like I didn't really have a table that people were like, hey, Visa, come and join us, So I was like, okay, if there's no table for me, then I have to make a table myself, right? So you sit on your own at first, maybe, but then if you find anyone else who's also kind of a loner, you can like introduce yourself or sit with them, and then slowly you kind of build brick by brick, you build a social reality to take care of you. And so like the skill sets that I developed, and I was doing it online a lot, especially. So I was on forums. When I discovered the internet, I was like, oh my god, the internet! I was like 7 or 8, and I love books already, and then I go online and I'm like, wow, I used to want to write books someday, maybe, but I don't know any publishers. I don't know how to get into that, But the moment I had internet access, I'm like, I can just reply to people anywhere in real time for free. And then just, it still excites me. The idea that I can see something and I can respond to it. And if you respond thoughtfully, and again, because I felt very like no one was really listening to me when I was a kid. And so I felt that other people must feel that way as well. Like there must be people who are making an effort in something and people are not listening to them. So if I make an effort to respond to people thoughtfully and listen to what they're saying, they would appreciate me. And it took a while for me to find the right people, but because some people actually don't appreciate it. If someone is not being thoughtful and they're just kind of making noise, and then you respond with thoughtfulness, they often actually hate it because you're spoiling their party of like complaining or just attacking people or whatever. But if you find people who are being thoughtful and you respond with thoughtfulness, they reciprocate, and then you can create context. And so that's been my online life, my whole life, I guess. And it's been heartbreaking on multiple occasions to discover that people are not universally, optimistic, encouraging, filled with gratitude for being exposed to free, like information for free or whatever. But I've come around to seeing that you don't actually need a lot of people to do. So again, like, being a politician, I think is challenging because everyone in the electorate is all the voters. You have to care about all the voters, right? And even people who are not voting, whatever. I think that's very difficult. Like, I don't have that kind of. You need like a broad centrist kind of appeal, I guess. Whereas I think I flourish more in if there's a project that like a dozen weirdos can do and make a change to something. That's the kind of thing I like to do. Like, and like I remember I was in junior college. I had this blog post called "The Doors" or something, 2 doors. Like in junior college, I had these lecture theaters, right? And there's the stage and then the doors on the 2 sides. And there's 2 doors on each side. And one of the doors would be locked. And then I would go in and I would watch people streaming in through the lecture theater. And it would take like 5-10 minutes for everyone to get. So the lecture is like supposed to be an hour long, hour 10 minutes, something. And it takes people 5 to 10 minutes to get in. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to get out. And one door on each side is locked. And so I would go and like I would try the next time I come in, I would open the lock on the door and open the thing. And like I went in and sat, and you can see the stream of people is twice as fast. So it's like 5-10 minutes becomes like 3 to 4 minutes maybe. And then you think about it, you add that up for every single lecture for the whole year. And that's like multiple free lectures worth of time, right? But like I never saw anybody else give a shit. Like everyone's just, I gotta go for my lecture, I gotta whatever. Like, and I've always been, the world's malleable. Like sometimes you see, I remember that I was making this video of, I think at Buona Vista MRT or One North MRT, like there's 2 escalators going down, 2 escalators, 1 escalator going down, 1 escalator going up. Then this side, 1 escalator going down, 1 escalator going up. And like when it's crowded, there's just a huge mess on each side. And I was like, if you just put both this side go down, both this side go up, it would be way better flow. And it's just, I mean, that's a fairly trivial observation, but like I'm always seeing things like this everywhere I go. And I'm always like, if I can make things better for people, like, why not? And like, so that's been my life. I just keep getting frustrated by things that I see that I think could be better. And I've tried to do what I can where I can. And I am now blessed enough that there is a substantial audience of people who see the way I do things and they like it. So that's very validating. I used to think that I'm going to struggle in like obscurity, kind of like lecturing to people or like, pleading with people. And I don't think there's this thing where there's like a local cuisine, local artist problem or like a hometown prophet problem. Like in the Bible, literally Jesus could go around performing miracles everywhere, and then he goes to his hometown of Nazareth. And in Nazareth, people are like, what do you mean the prophet? Isn't that the carpenter's son? Like it's just some local guy. Like, why should I listen to him? And like, if even Jesus can't overcome that, like I don't know who expects it. But so I've learned. So I used to think this is a Singaporean problem where Singaporeans don't appreciate local music, local everything. Right? So local everything is inferior. But it turns out it's not even an Asian thing, because even in like Australia, Australians apparently don't appreciate their local artists, local musicians and all over the world this is true. It's true in Brazil, it's true in India. People only really seem to respect local artists when they go across the world and become successful you have a hot restaurant in London, your band plays at a festival in San Francisco, there's something that you do somewhere on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
then now you can do a homecoming and people are like, oh, award-winning artist, award-winning thing. And, I part of me found the idea disgusting initially. Like, why would you want approval of people who only respect such a naked attempt at like status climbing or whatever? Like, it's just a thing. Like, why can't you just appreciate my music for what it is? Why can't you just appreciate my writing for what it is?
Yeah.
But I've come to see that, I mean, I still have that feeling a little bit, but like, I've come to see that, again, people are busy and tired and they don't have the time and energy to really analyze and assess things on their true merits. And so they use proxies, they use social proof, they use all these other things. And like, once you understand this is how the world works, you can you can complain about it, or you can just make the slight extra effort to do it.
Yeah.
And another version of this was I didn't realize that my parents used to always ask me, when you going to university, when you going to go to university.
Yeah.
Because I told them I was going to go, and then I ended up not going. And then I didn't appreciate that my mom really wanted to show her family, oh, here's my son, he graduated, I'm a good mom. I mean, she wouldn't say that. I don't know if she even thinks it, but that's part of the social contract or whatever, right? Like, you show that you're a good parent or whatever. That's like the graduation photo. A lot of people have the family photo of the kids who are graduates. They're all wearing their. It's just a sign that you've made it in some ways. And I felt like I didn't need that because I've made it in my own way that's to me. But I hadn't considered like my parents' point of view, I guess.
Yeah.
And it turns out that the there's this idea of a jobs to be done framework. It's from Clay Christensen. It's a business world concept. But basically, people are hiring things to perform jobs for them. So if you're drinking a milkshake in your car, you're performing it to entertain you while you're there or whatever. Anyway, the thing that the graduation photo performs a job of signaling social acceptance, social climbing, social, like, all of those things. You don't necessarily need to be a graduate for that. You in fact, so it turns out one of the ways you can get it is like media attention.
Yeah.
And I kind of got some media attention by almost random, where I was running a t-shirt business on the side for fun, and like it's very like local slogans and stuff, and I got like attention for like it's the front page of Life Straits Times, and like that, my mom can send that to her sisters or whatever and be like, oh, this is my son. And if I had internalized from the beginning that, oh, my parents just want to be proud, have a thing to show off about their son. If I had realized that, I would have been able to solve that problem or address that issue more. I could have attacked it head on and got it out of the way much sooner. But I just didn't. I didn't think about it that way, and I didn't care about it that way. And so I ended up kind of. It's funny. It's funny to realize that I could have made it go away. I could have made my parents happier sooner. Because from my point of view, it's like it doesn't matter whether or not you are how many followers you have, or how many. Like, there are people who congratulate me on my follower count, but like, I'm the same guy doing the same tweets, but like, sure, if follower count is something that you respect, then
the external process.
Yeah, if this is what, like the generous reading is like, this is the thing that makes you take a thing seriously, I guess. So sure, glad to be appreciated now, whatever. But so.
No, but really thank you for telling the story. Like, I think that the time is like coming towards the end. So sure. I just want to pose like one last maybe question to you, right? Which is that, like, what's your most like tough love opinion or take on Singapore? And like, what do we desperately need? But maybe people may not like hearing it.
Everyone needs to grow up sometimes at some point in time. And again, like, people can throw this around like an insult or attack, but like, I would like to see more Singaporeans kind of have more self-respect and more agency, and really kind of reach out personally for the life that they want, and take responsibility for it, and to get themselves to where they want to go, and almost like taboo yourself from blaming the government or blaming your parents or blaming the culture, or like, all those things could be true. All those things could be true in that you are limited in all sorts of ways. But like, I mean, I usually talk about artists because I am a writer, and I it's the domain that I'm familiar with, and there are artists who are like, well, I just need support to do what I'm doing, and it's like from you should find a way to do what you want to do you might not be able to, so maybe you want to make like a musical, right? Like a very big project, and like, yeah, you can't do that if you're broke and you don't have time. You have to work your job every day. You don't have time for that. You can't do a big musical. But like, can you make a TikTok of the most iconic scene in your musical? You know what I mean? Like, find a way to share your gift or share your insight or whatever it is. Find some small way to do it and do that, and then show it to everyone you meet. Like, really, like, you have to. So like, the thing people hope for is one day I will be magically recognized for my talent and appreciated, and I'll be handed the keys to the kingdom. And like, even outside of Singapore, that's just not the way it is. Like, you really have to bust your ass, and you really have to. And I don't mean to like fetishize like hustler culture. Like, there's a certain something about that is just weird to me. Like, it is painful, it's hard, but you have to take care of yourself. You have to manage your feelings and enjoy your life also. Don't beat yourself to the ground trying to prove a point or something. But if you have a vision for something, that, and it could even just be vision for, I want a happy family. Like, okay, cool, think about like what is a happy family to you. How do you want to spend time with your kids on the weekends? Do you want to bring them to the library? Do you want to go hiking? Like define for yourself what you want, and don't be careful not to fall into the side. So like, some amount of complaining is acknowledging the nature of your situation. Like, you're in a situation that's not good. Like, it's not tenable or whatever. Like, the past 5 people I've gone on dates with, they're all some way. Like, sure, like, that's valid. Like, maybe Singaporeans, a lot of them are boring or bad at communicating or whatever. Like, it's just fine. But like, be careful you don't spiral into, I am now going to participate in like shitty gender discourse every week at the expense of like looking for someone who might be a fit, even if they are the person that you're looking for or the outcome you're looking for is rare or uncommon, or like 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 or whatever. Then it just takes years of persistence to get to it, and you have to try and be upbeat while you do it, which is difficult. That's life. If you want uncommonly good outcomes, you have to have uncommon endurance and uncommon, upbeat qualities and stuff like that. And again, like, I imagine some people will hear this and go, fuck that guy, like, I'm not gonna, I don't deserve, like, again, I said earlier, like, humanity is run by volunteers. Everything good requires people to give a shit more than they are being compensated for, or fairly, so, and again, most people probably are not gonna like rise to that. Like, it's a call to adventure kind of, right? It's a kind of invitation to raise your standards and to shoot for the stars, right? Shoot for the company of immortals. But like, the crazy thing is, the world gets so much better from just such a small percentage of people going along with that. That if like 1 in 10,000 people who listen think, yeah, okay, I'll be like, yeah, that's worth it for me, because I just need one guy here, one guy there. It adds up. But yeah, so be careful. Focus on what you want to see more of, right? Focus on the outcomes that you want, and don't let people who are unserious and not interested in better outcomes distract you from the work that in your heart you should be doing. Yeah.
I think that's a very good place to end it on. Yeah. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
today,
you for having
Lisa.
me. It's so fun to talk.